Hi, my name is Ed Baldoni. Today I'm going to show you how to build a countertop using our GFRZ Pro mix. The first step in building a countertop is to make an accurate template. We're using 1/4-inch plywood, which we're simply going to glue together. Once the template is made, we bring that back to our shop to build a mold. So we want to determine first the depth that we want our countertop. And what I like to do is have it about a 1/2 inch past the cabinet face. That brings me out to 25.5 inches. Now I know that we're working with 25.5 inches. We'll just measure 25. Now we want to make sure too that we always cut these square. So we're using our square and just with a sharp blade and the utility knife, a few scores. Break it, and there we have it, 25.5 inches. Now I have my 25.5 inch pieces of Luan plywood. I'm going to lay them out on top of the cabinet. You always want to determine where your sink cabinet is going to be and put one on each side of the sink cabinet, and I'll show you why we're doing that in a little while. All right. Take our longer pieces, and all we're going to do is use hot glue to glue these together. Making sure this is tight to the wall, and this is tight to the wall. Now I'm going to keep this one even with the inside of the cabinet. Moving right down the line. Again, we're keeping this one even with the inside of the cabinet. Now I'm going to mark this cabinet. So when I go to put my sink mold in, I know where to put it. Sink cabinet. All right, the template is finished. We could bring this template back to the shop to build our mold. Keep in mind that this is right side up. When you build your mold, it has to be reversed. We're back in the shop with our template. We're going to use this template to build our form. All we're going to do is put the template down on top of our melamine surface. Make sure that you flip that template over because we're actually building this top in reverse. You could see over here, because our tops were longer than 8 feet and melamine is only 8 feet long, we had to join our melamine surface. Where we joined it, we bonded it, sanded it, and it got super smooth from sanding. The rest of the surface has a little bit of a texture, but not to worry because in post-production, we're going to wind up sanding the entire top and it'll all get uniform. Then we're going to use our 1.5 by 2 inch precast form. This is going to build the form that we're going to spray against. To use this form, we're going to put 2-way tape on the 1.5 inch side and just simply stick them down up against our template. Don't forget to tape your template in place, and do not use the 2-way sticky tape for this. Just use some blue painter's tape. All right, our precast forms are now held in place. You saw how easy they went into place with our two-way tape. We did use our precast forms because they're 2 inches or 1.5 inches, and this project called for a 2-inch apron. If you were going to have a larger apron, you'd either have to use melamine or styrofoam and cut it to whatever size you need that apron to be. Coming down here, you're going to see, all right, why doesn't this fit in? Well, what we did was we moved our end form in 1/8 of an inch to give us a little bit of extra room so we could slide these countertops into place. This job is calling for an integral sink, so we're going to use our sink form, put it down, we'll measure it and center it, and we'll be ready to go. We removed the template, we marked down where the sink is going. Now where we joined our forms, you can see there's a little line there, a little ridge. Now it will sand out, but to make it even easier to sand out, we're going to put a piece of packing tape over it. The packing tape will also leave a ridge, but it's going to be a lot smaller and easier to sand out. Now we're going to caulk all the bottom here. All right, we're all vacuumed out now. You want to make sure you clean this surface really good because whatever is left on here is going to show up in your final finish. Now we're going to bring in Robbie to do the caulking. We are using type 2 silicone to seal everything up with. It really sets up quick, but you want to make sure you use type 2 because there's type 1 and 2, and 2 is the one you want. Now that we have our sink mold caulked into place, one more thing I want to mention. We're going to need a hole in the top for our faucet. What we wound up using was our Euroform sink plug, and we cut the bottom off of it, and we'll just adhere that into place.
Okay, now we're ready to cast some concrete. For this project, we're going to be utilizing our GFRZ Pro product. GFRZ Pro is a GFRC or glass fiber reinforced concrete mix. When we were developing this mix, we intended it to be the highest quality and most versatile mix on the market. To do this, we started with the very best blend of white Portland cement, white sands, polymer, defoamer, shrink reducer, and other ingredients to ensure a strong, pinhole-free casting. GFRZ Pro offers high compressive and high flexural strength, as well as no cracking or curling. It can be used in a number of applications, including countertops, furniture, wall panels, and even more. Today, we're going to show you 2 different GFRC applications. First, we will spray a fiber-free face coat, then come back with our backer mix, adding AR glass fibers to get the thickness to 3/4 of an inch. Then, we will also show you how to brush on your face coat in case you don't have access to a hopper gun or a compressor. Although we will not be showing it in this video, it's also worth mentioning this mix can be modified with additional plasticizer to create a wet cast or SCC self-consolidating mix. All right, let's get to mixing some concrete. All right, now we're ready to start mixing up the concrete. First, what we're going to do is weigh out our water. For each 45-pound pre-blended bag of GFRZ Pro, you're going to be looking at 8.0 to 8.6 pounds of water. And that difference is going to be related to the casting process. For this process, we're going to be using our GFRC hopper gun. We're going to be spraying a face coat. So we're going to weigh out 8.6 pounds of cold or iced water. The cold or iced water is going to give you more working time when you start the application process. So So we have our 8.6 pounds of water weighed out. We're going to dump about half of the water into a clean mixing bucket. And for this project, we're actually going to be adding some integral pigment to the project. So what I actually have is our pigments pre-batched out. So what we're going to do is we're going to dump our pigment pack into the water, disperse that, and then slowly fold in the mix so that we have a nice, fully dispersed color throughout the blend. All right, continuing with the mixing process, we've got about half of our water in here with our pigment fully dispersed. We took one of our 45-pound bags of GFRZ Pro. We actually put it into one of our buckets, a little easier just to maneuver and pour into our mixing vessel. So again, we've got our water, we've got our pigment. I'm going to start to slowly mix. My associate is going to fold in our powder. Go ahead. The reason we're taking our time is we don't want the mix to get choked. We're going to take our time, slowly put in the rest of our water here, and then slowly fold in the rest of the material. If needed, we have our plasticizer that we can help get the flow that we're looking for to spray. So you see when I'm mixing it, I'm trying to make sure I get to the bottom of the bucket. We don't want any unmixed material, any unmixed powder at the bottom. Always a good practice to carefully, when you're not mixing, take your margin trowel, scrape the sides of the bucket, make sure that we have everything. You can see right there we've got some powder that's not mixed. So we're going to want to go back, mix that up again. The beauty of this mix, a lot of GFRC products have what's called a slaking stage, where you actually have to let the mix sit for a while, then remix it before you use it. The beauty of this mix, the polymer that we're utilizing, you don't have to wait. There's no slaking stage. So basically from the bucket to the hopper gun to the mold. All right, we're going to give this another little mix. Okay, so now it's time to check the consistency before we put it into the hopper gun and spray it. This is a very high cement, high polymer mix, so you can see it's a little thick right now for where we want it to be. You don't want to add any additional water to it. That's just going to weaken the concrete. We're not looking for weak concrete, we're looking for the strong concrete. So what we're going to do right now, add a little bit of our water reducer. I'm going to start with 5 milliliters, building up to possibly 10 milliliters to get the flow and the viscosity we're looking for. With water reducers, super plasticizers, a little goes a long way. So it is always good to start off with just a little bit, and you can always add more. That was a little under 5 milliliters, so we definitely need a little bit more. Go. All right, so checking the consistency before we spray here. You can see it's got a nice little bit of a hang, but it also falls down. We don't want it to be too wet because when you're spraying a vertical application, you want it to hang on the walls. But you also want it to have a viscosity that comes through the hopper gun nice enough. So this is a pretty good viscosity that we're looking for right now. So we're going to go ahead and start to get ready to spray. Okay, before we cast or spray any concrete, it is a good practice to apply release agent to areas that are going to need release agent. Melamine, Our precast forms, they don't actually need any release agent. You're going to be able to have a nice bond break when you demold from there. But when you're using a sink mold, anything that's polyurethane, like a sink plug or a faucet knockout or anything like that, it's a good idea to use release agent. We're going to be using our Z release agent. You can actually spray it on, but since we're going for just one designated area, I'm actually just going to decant just a little bit into this tub here. And we're just going to use a clean rag. We're not looking to saturate the mold. We're just looking to get a nice little coating on here so we have a bond breaker. So I'm just going to go ahead and wipe this Z release onto our sink mold. And this will help us with ease of release when we demold the project. Again, focusing as well on the sink and the faucet knockouts. Okay, now we're ready to start spraying with our hopper gun. We sell and use the MK3 hopper gun. It's got a nice size hopper so you don't have too much material in it. It's got a nice swivel base. It's really good for spraying GFRC applications, the MK3 hopper gun. So for the spraying process, you always want to start either by blowing out the corners to get any dust or avoid any sand, or if you're working with a model, like a mold like this, a base, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start right here at the bottom of this sink mold and build up so we get a nice tight bond. So we're going to be spraying a face coat. It's going to be a very thin face coat. And then we're going to come back with our backer mix. Ready? Okay, we've got our face coat sprayed. Now, before we apply our backer, we've got to wait just a short period of time. The reason being, you can tell it's still a little shiny, so it's still a little wet. We don't want it to be too wet when we apply the backer coat, or the fibers could push through to the face coat. On the adverse, if it's too dry, you can run the risk of delamination when you're applying the backer coat and have the face coat delaminate from the backer. So again, it's a little bit about timing. It's about the relative temperature in your shop. Typically, it's around 20 minutes to 30 minutes before you apply the backer coat. Most importantly though, you want to do a soft touch test just to make sure that it's still a little moist and not too dry. Okay, for this portion, we're going to show you a different application demonstration. If you're not afforded the use of a hopper gun, you can actually use a chip brush, and you can brush on the face coat, up the vertical and onto the face of the countertop, and then you can come back with the fibrous backer coat and hand pack it. Very similar mixing instructions, very similar application instructions, except that you are brushing on the face coat as opposed to using the hopper gun. Let's get to mixing. Okay, we got our material mixed. We're going to start with just a small amount of material poured inside the mold. And what we're going to do is start to use one of our chip brushes and pull it up the sides of the forms, as well as brushing it onto the face of the mold. So for the face coat, we're looking for about 1/8 of an inch and then a final thickness of around 3/4 of an inch. So we're just going to, again, get a nice thin face coat brushed onto the forms and onto the melamine before we come with our backer coat that's going to have the fiber in it. You can see it's hanging real nice vertically. That's what we want to make sure. It doesn't have too much water reducer, that it's falling down. It's hanging perfectly. So the consistency of this is sort of like cake icing. It's just like icing a cake. It's got a batter-like consistency at times. One of the things we want to do is we do want to make sure we have full coverage. We don't want to see any of the white from the melamine, and obviously we don't want to see any of the blacks from the forms. So we'll go back and make sure we have a nice thickness and we have a nice coverage. Okay, we have our face coat applied. Now we're ready to start preparing, mixing, and applying our backer coat. Our backer coat is going to be a similar process with water and pigment, but it is going to have the addition of AR glass fibers. Now these are bundled fibers that are going to be added to the end of the mixing process for increased strength, additional flexural and compressive strength. In the face coat, we used around 8.6 pounds of water with the addition of plasticizer. For the backer coat, we're looking for it to be a little thicker, so we're going to go in the lower range of the water, 8.0 pounds of water. So I'm going to go ahead and weigh that out now. All right, so we have our 8 pounds of water weighed out. And again, we'll go ahead and continue with the mixing process, pouring about half of the water into the bucket, dispersing and blending our pigment, slowly folding in the powder. Once we're completely blended with the mix, the pigment and the water, that's when we will add our fibers. We don't want to add them too soon. They can break, and that will take away the strength that the fibers offer. Okay, continuing with the mixing process, again, very similar to the face coat with just the addition of the fibers. So we'll go ahead and start with about half of our water, about 4 pounds of water in there. Our pre-batched pigment, we'll go ahead and dump that into the water. And again, to make sure that our color is uniformed throughout the casting, we're going to go ahead and mix up the pigment now in the water so that it's fully dispersed. Okay. Now we'll start to add in our powder. This is 45 pounds of our GFRZ Pro. Again, we put it into a bucket for the ease of blending. All right, we're just about done with our backer coat. We're, again, looking for a thicker consistency so we can build up a false edge. What we're going to do now is add in 3% AR glass fiber. So this is 3% load to the 45-pound bag, about 1.35 pounds. What you don't want to do is over-mix these fibers. Again, these are bundled fibers, so we want them to stay bundled so that they retain their strength. So we're going to slowly fold these in, mix them up slightly, and then move over to the mold and apply the backer coat. One note I will say, these are AR, alkali resistant glass fibers. It is fiberglass, so you do want to wear protective gloves so you don't have these touch your hand. They can be very irritating. All right, so again, you're just going to slowly fold those in. Now, since we're hand applying this backer coat, we're looking for a little bit of a thicker material. So you can see this is going to have some body so we can build up our false edges. If you were just going to pour this in, you can add a little bit of plasticizer and it'll allow it to flow better. But this is definitely the consistency we're looking for. We want to be able to build up, have some vertical, and build a false edge. All right, our backer mix is all mixed up. We're ready to start applying it by hand. We're going to start on the sink and we're actually going to hand pack this. We're looking for around 3/4 of an inch thickness. Again, with our face coat being partially set up, we have enough rigidity in the face coat that we can apply and push the backer coat so we have a nice strong bonding. We're looking for a strong bonding here on the base or what will be the face of the sink as well. If you weren't doing something vertical like this sink and it was just a standard countertop, you could add a little bit of plasticizer to this mix and effectively pour in your backer coat. Now in this instance, we're going to be doing a false edge, so we're definitely going to have to do some handwork there. But not an uncommon practice to add a little extra plasticizer to your backer coat and just pour it across. And we can actually do that in this portion, but for the sink right now, we want to focus on a really nice tight pack. We want to make sure a good thickness, not too thick, not too thin. And again, we're looking for a really good bond. You can see my material, my face coat is still just a little wet to the touch, so we should have that bond. We don't want it to be dry. If it's dry, you're going to run the risk of delamination. So the ideal thickness for GFRC is going to be 3/4 of an inch. You can go thicker, but ideally you want it to be 3/4 of an inch. That allows it to retain that lightweight capability of the face only being 3/4 of an inch. Now, over here, we're actually going to be building up around a 2-inch apron, and that's going to give us what some consider a false edge, but this apron allows us to set right nicely on top of our cabinets. So here we're building up the false apron throughout the casting. Around most of it, it's going to be around an inch, inch and a half. This is the face of it, so we've actually built it out around 2 inches. The 2 inches is perfect so that it can set right on top of the cabinet, and we have the sink right here as well. Okay, as we continue to build up our apron around the edges, you'll notice here and in the front we have around 2 inches. And the reason we built this is actually additional support when it lays on top of the cabinet. We're going to continue to keep this at the 3/4 of an inch. We're going to put an additional brace here. Okay, we are done with our first portion of the casting. We are going to allow this to cure 18 to 24 hours or overnight. And best practice is actually to cover it up with plastic, and we're going to do that in a moment. And that allows the moisture to retain inside the concrete so we have a stronger concrete casting. Okay, here we are 24 hours later, and we are ready to demold our countertop and sink. We've already went ahead and removed the plastic, but before we remove the forms, it is a good practice to go ahead and make sure that you're going to be level with the forms so that we have a nice flat surface here when it lays onto the cabinets. Now, we did a really good job of finishing the underside, screeding it, leveling it, and troweling it. In case you don't do that, what you're going to want to use is an angle grinder and a cup wheel, and that's going to be a little bit more aggressive to knock down any high areas. Again, since we took some time to go ahead and finish the bottom, we're actually going to be using a palm sander with one of our Diamond Disc 60 grit pads, and we're going to go ahead and lightly sand this down just to make sure that we're nice and flat. Okay, we are all done sanding. Now it's time to demold it. So again, a really nice face thanks to the spray technique and the forms. As you can see here, we have definitely got some pinholes. This is a really tight area to spray, but this is a great opportunity to go ahead and use our slurry in here to fill this in. Nice. That's nice. Okay, here we are with our casting outside of the mold, and we've allowed it to cure for a few days. Now what we're going to do is use our Patch Pro to fill in any small blemishes or pinholes that you might have on the surface. When we were casting this, we sort of had an idea that we might get some pinholes right here in this area. It was a really tight area when we were spraying it. So in advance, we sort of knew we were going to come back with the Patch Pro and fill in any voids or blemishes. Mix ratio is pretty standard on this, 3 parts powder to about 1 part water. You're able to adjust the consistency based on the blemishes or the pinholes that you have on the surface or the sides. If you're looking for a thicker consistency, you can add a little bit more powder. If you're looking for a thinner consistency, obviously add just a little bit more water. The Patch Pro starts off at a nice white base, easily pigmented. To start, we're going to mix to the consistency that we're looking for, and then slowly fold in the pigment. We're looking to get as close as possible to the same color as our wet concrete when we sprayed. Realize the Patch Pro does not have any sands or fine aggregates in it, so to get an exact color match, it can be tough. What we're really looking to do is trying to be within a natural color variation that exists in this slab. It's not a bad idea to conduct some small scale tests if you're looking for a closer match. All right, let's get to mixing. Okay, we've got our Patch Pro weighed out here. We're going to go ahead and start mixing this and then add in our pigment. Typically we'll use a drill mixer and a Jiffy mixer. If you don't have access, you can use a paint stick. You just want to make sure that it's thoroughly blended. So let's go ahead and fold in our powder into our water. All right, so that's about the consistency we're looking for. Again, if needed, you could add more powder, more water if you want it to be thinner or thicker. So now we're going to start to add in our pigment to try to get the color match. Start with a little, just like a haircut. That is pretty close to the color that we sprayed the other day. So we're gonna go ahead and apply our Slurry Patch Pro. Okay, we're gonna start applying our Patch Pro on this troubled area that we talked about earlier. You can apply it by hand, which is what I'm gonna do. And then a lot of times what you're gonna do is take a plastic scraper and either pull up or pull to the side, just to make sure that it fills in all those pinholes. Now if you get a little bit on the top, like I just did, don't worry, because we're going to actually be covering that as well. So you can see I'm applying a little thick in some areas, but we're going to go ahead and wet polish this all off. It is good practice to polish or remove the slurry within 24 hours. This is a polymer modified slurry. The Patch Pro is polymer modified, so it will get very hard very quick. The longer you wait to remove it, the harder it will be. Okay, we've got our countertop and integral sink covered with the Patch Pro slurry. We're going to allow this to cure, and then we're going to polish it off. Okay, it's been just under 24 hours since we applied our slurry, and as you can see, it's nice and hard. What we're going to do now is wet polish. For this job, we will only be using 200 grit pads because our main purpose is only to remove the excess slurry, ease any sharp edges, and remove the melamine texture. Depending on what type of finish you're looking for, you could polish all the way up to a 3000 grit if desired. Before we get started, let's talk tools. For the majority of the surface, we're going to be using our 5-head planetary polisher. If you're doing a lot of countertops, this is a great tool to invest in because it rides perfectly flat across the top. However, if you don't have access to a tool like this, you can easily use a standard electric wet polisher like the one we sell on our website. In our shop, we use a wet polisher like this. This is a pneumatic wet polisher, and we're going to be using this for the project. Finally, you will be seeing us use our gem pad. This is a diamond hand pad with 3 interchangeable grits, 60, 150, and 300. What's nice about these is the pads come off the foam backer, so they're flexible and you can use them to get around tight areas like the sink. All right, let's get started.
Our top is all polished and ready for sealer. In this case, we're using our Cycle 14. It is a water-based penetrating sealer, which we really like, especially for this application. We do have other sealers that you'll find on our website with full instructions. It is important to pick the right sealer for the job. Let's get this sealed up and we'll be ready to install.